Hey guys, RJ here. We're in the shop today. We got a customer's 2008 Chevy Silverado in here, and like all Chevys, they just sit too low from the factory. So we're going to see if we can take care of that with some parts provided by Rough Country. So let's take a glance at what we got to work with. We got a bone stock 2008 Chevy Silverado extended cab with fender flares on it. Why anybody would put fender flares on a bone stock truck is beyond me. But we're going to see if we can't take care of that today. We're going to add a 2.5 inch Rough Country lift on the front and a 1 inch lift on the rear. Hopefully give it a little better stance and some room to clear a set of 33 1250 Turo. We got the jack stands underneath the truck. We're ready to start taking wheels off. See if we can tear into this thing. We're gonna get started by buzzing some wheels off. Now we got a chance to see what kind of rusted up pile of junk we may have. As you can see from the pics here that this truck spent most of its life in Ohio and has seen better days. We're going to start by spraying everything down with some penetrating lube. We're going to have to pull this ball joint nut off, a tie rod nut off, these 3 bolts on the top of the strut to actually remove the strut itself, and these 2 lower bolts here and here that actually hold the strut in. And we're going to attempt to remove the bolt right here and link, and hopefully it comes out without breaking. Sometimes when they're corroded pretty bad, they don't come out very well, but we'll give it a try. Hopefully we can get everything disassembled here. And I like to start by spraying everything down with a good penetrating oil. It just helps the threads pull through. It kind of helps from keeping everything from galding up when they are this bad. Makes disassembly a little faster, cleaner, and easier. Give that a few minutes to soak in. Spray everything up top. I start by pulling the nut off the bottom of the tie rod end. It's a 21 millimeter. Set it aside for now, and we're going to grab an 18 millimeter ratcheting wrench, and we're going to go ahead and loosen the bolt here on the bottom of the ball joint. And a little trick you can do here is if you leave this bottom nut on a couple threads, when you go to separate this upper control arm from the knuckle, when you actually hit it and it pops loose, that actually stops it from falling and damaging any brake lines or anything. Let's see if we can get this separated. You give these knuckles a quick hit right here on the end of the joint right there, and that'll free up this tapered fit on the end of the tie rod. Freeze it right up. And what I like to do here is actually remove the ABS lines here. It just keeps from hurting anything. If you happen to drop it or move it or pinch it, just keeps you from damaging these cables for your ABS sensors, your speed sensors. This one here has a 10 millimeter bolt in it. You can remove it if it doesn't break. Just gives a little bit of slack in the line so you can actually move things around a little bit. Just keeps from pulling these lines. They're pretty sensitive, and there's no point in tearing up more than we have to. We'll give this a couple quick blows here and see if we can get that ball joint to separate. There we go. Sometimes you got to give it a little persuasion. We'll pull down on this, that'll pull the knuckle in. We can take this nut off. Set it aside, that'll allow the axle and the bottom control arm to extend out. And we're going to go ahead and grab our 15 millimeter and we're going to loosen up this sway bar end link right here. And we're going to go ahead and buzz the bolts out of the bottom of the strut itself. There's two bolts. They're also a 15 millimeter. You can get to them from the bottom side here, and that'll let the lower control arm lower to the ground, give you enough room to get the strut out. And as you can see, this actual clip that actually retains the, it actually acts as a nut. It's actually pressed onto the end of the bottom of the strut. The little ears broke off of it because it's all corroded. So we're going to try to put a pair of vice grips on there and see if we can spin that the rest of the way off. I think we can get a hold of this. There's a square part on the end of that nut. We're going to see if we can get a hold of it. See if that'll hold it, and we'll buzz it the rest of the way out. That did the trick there. Now you can kind of see what I'm talking about. This has a little ears that held on it that was pressed up around the bottom of the strut, and it actually broke the ears off of those. And, well, the vice grips did the trick. We're going to go ahead and see if we can get this sway bar end link the rest of the way off. It's pretty frozen up too. Broke out the big 1/2-inch drive Mac gun. I did the trick. Alright, now we can go ahead and remove the upper strut bolts. One of them has a wiring harness on the top of it. We're going to go ahead and buzz those loose with a 18 millimeter ratcheting wrench. And then we're going to take the strut out, and we can put the spacer on the top, spacer on the bottom, put everything back together, and we'll be up and running. You do keep these bolts with nuts will be reused on the strut after you put the spacer back in. I like to leave this front one loose, and that keeps the strut from falling out when you take the other ones out, and then you can just spin that one off by hand and pull the strut the rest of the way down out of the truck. go, last one's out. The strut's out of the truck. Now comes the shiny new parts. Alright, now that we got the strut out of the truck, we have to remove these keepers that originally held the bottom of the strut to the lower control arm. These keepers aren't reused. You actually put a bolt and a nut back in there. I just like to use a pry bar, and if you just twist on a little bit, it'll pop right out. And we're not reusing these. These get thrown away, so we're good to go. Toss those. We're ready to reinstall the strut with the new spacer on the top. The spacer will only go one way. You just kind of turn it till you find the right direction. There's 3 different corners. And it'll sit on top, and that gives you the top of your strut. Now we're ready to reinstall the strut back up into the truck. Using the original hardware to mount to the top of the strut. We got the strut set back in the truck. I got one nut holding the strut in place. Now we're gonna go ahead and start the other ones by hand, just leave them loose. That'll give us some room to wiggle down here to line up the bottom bolts on the strut. Alright, now we're ready for our bottom strut spacer. We're gonna line it up, and I like to use a floor jack underneath the control arm. We'll raise the jack up till we can get everything about where we need to be before we drop the bolts in. Now we're ready for the bottom strut spacer. Just line it up. The angle goes up like that, the lower part to the back. Turn it around like that and line up the bolts and drop everything in place. I like to run the washer up on the bolt and run the bolts down through the control arm. That helps for clearance issues with these axles. If you were to run them up through, the bolt might rub the axle. Now that the bolts are started in, we'll raise the jack. And I'll raise the lower control arm. Hopefully enough the bolts will start. Give them a little tap down in there. And go ahead and grab a washer and another nut. And we're going to go ahead and run everything up from the bottom, install the nuts and washers in the bottom of the strut. That's that. And then we're going to go ahead and raise this up just a little higher and snug up some of the hardware. And we're going to go ahead and raise this up with the jack, tighten up against the bottom of the strut, make sure we line up the sway bar in link with the sway bar as we go up, and then we're going to snug up all the hardware and then go finish assembly. We got a little load on the jack now. What we're going to do is we're going to take a pry bar and lower this upper control arm ball joint down back into the steering knuckle with the help of the pry bar. And go ahead and grab the nut, spin it on there loosely, and grab a nut, hold it down with the pry bar. You go ahead and pull the control arm into place with a pry bar, spin the nut on by hand, snug that up as much as we can here. Just watch the ABS line. Alright. We're going to going to go ahead and run up the upper bolt snug. And we're going to go ahead and tighten the bottom 2 strut bolts and draw everything kind of up tight. The hardware on the new replacement hardware on the bottom of the strut is now 17 millimeter. So we need a 17 millimeter socket and wrench. We're going to go ahead and run them up tight. And we're going to go ahead and snug up the top of the strut using the 18 millimeter wrench. We're going to run the bolts up snug in it. Those ran up snug. Now we install our bushing and our nuts on top of our sway bar end link. Make sure you put the rubber on the right direction. It'll have a little indentation on it. It'll help you remember which way it goes. Just use a pry bar and push down on the sway bar a little bit. That'll give you enough room to get your nut started. And once you get your nut started, you can go ahead and run it up. Careful not to over tighten the tie rod in, right? You don't need to smash the bushings all out. And we'll come back and tighten these all to factory specs when we're done. We'll just run them up snug. Using our 18 millimeter wrench, we're going to go ahead and snug up the bottom ball joint. Drop it down into the knuckle, the tapered part will hold it together. We'll run the nut up. I'm going to run the nut up on the end of the tie rod here using a 21 millimeter ratcheting wrench. And torque to factory spec. Next thing we're going to do is reinstall the ABS line and the brake line back into the stock location with the stock bolts. Secure the ABS line out through the brake line and keep her back together. Alright, and then snap the ABS line back into place. And that does it for this side of the truck. Make sure to go back and torque the tie rod into factory spec, the upper ball joint to factory spec, as well as the upper and lower strut bolts. And as long as the sway bar end link is snug, everything should be good there. And you're ready to move on to the other side. And then we'll hit the back. Alright guys, we're on to the rear end here. It's super simple, super straightforward. All we have to do is remove these 4 nuts off the U-bolts, We'll lower the axle down to the ground a little bit, pull the factory block out, and then we'll install the new Rough Country spacer block. Lower the axle to the ground and get the block out. There's the factory block. Install the new Rough Country block, making sure to align the tabs with this pin. Run the axle back up tight to the spring. And install the new U-bolts. Now all we got left to do is run the bolts up tight. And that'll complete our lift kit installation on our Chevy 1500 here. Now for the best part of the whole video, new wheels and tires. Now we'll drop them down, all on the ground. We'll go ahead and torque the wheels, throw the center caps on. We'll check out what the truck turned out like. Alright guys, here it is. It's all finished up. 2.5 inch on the front, 20 by 9 plus 18 wheels, 33 1250 Atturo Trail Blade MTs. Turned out pretty sharp. It's a good looking truck now. Alright guys, truck's all finished up. I'm extremely happy with the way it came out. Wheels and tires fit perfect, truck looks good. Hey, let me know how you think the truck looked in the comments below. Hey, give us a like and a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next